Side effects of listening to this episode may include sudden urges to quit your job, elevated stress over self-employment taxes, existential dread about work-life balance, and an uncontrollable desire to open an LLC with absolutely no plan. In rare cases, listening to this podcast may result in a deep emotional connection to your local small business owner, followed by an excessive spending at their establishment. If symptoms persist, please seek professional advice, preferably from someone who still has employer-sponsored health insurance. Join the Chaos is not responsible for any life choices made under the influence of our bad decisions. Proceed with caution. Now let's get into it.
Welcome back to Join the Chaos, the podcast where we unpack the absolute madness of running a small business and remind ourselves why we thought this was a good idea.
Spoiler, it might not have been, but here we are. If this is your first time listening, I'm Gabe, coffee guy, chaos coordinator, and a person who voluntarily gave up stability to start multiple businesses.
And I'm Melissa, tea expert, small business owner, and someone who once thought, this looks fun, I'll put all my money into it, and sounded like a reasonable life choice.
Today, we're going to be digging into our origin stories, how we got here, why we left corporate, and what we wish we had known before jumping into the deep end of small businesses.
Basically, it's an episode-length answer to the question, why the hell would you do this to yourself? So let's rewind. What were we doing before we decided to make the jump into small business chaos?
I know for me, so I came from a background in corporate banking. So I'd been in banking for 15 years. I had started as a teller, the infamous 2007 early banking days.
Yikes.
Yeah, super fun. Start with a bang, graduate and then go right into a banking crisis, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was in a region called Southern California working for a bank that had a square red logo that may or may not be famous for its banking practices in that time in that region. We will not go further than that. So yeah, my career started there and I worked my way through operations. And when I finally left to do Brick Road, I was a compliance manager at another bank. And I'd been doing that for a few years. And I just got my degree in it and thought this was what I wanted to do with my life. I want to be a compliance manager. Why would anybody say that? But I thought that.
Yeah. Well, somebody has to do it.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Maybe not in today's world, but
No, not today.
In the past, that was an important role. And if that's kind of your jam, it feels like
it was something I could control, which is so weird. Like I was like, I like compliance because it's the law. Like you can control it. Like you know what you can and can't do. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So how I went from there to owning a business, don't know. Because there's no control over here.
Well, I
or
think
is there more?
We strive for that same type of control, but it's, the constant herding of cats that are everywhere. Or one of my phrases I like to say, it's juggling angry cats.
Yeah.
They're just everywhere all the time and they're real mad. But, I think we both really strive for that kind of Zen moment of a spreadsheet or something that is organized, that stays organized for 2 minutes and then it's chaos again.
Yep.
But there is a drive for that compliance, even though we create our own.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's true. So what about you? Tell me about your previous life.
My journey prior to tea. I also come from corporate, but I'm just going to say the company.
That's
and
fine.
I know you're being very shady over there about it, but
Well, the company I came from has been sued multiple times. So I don't want to get it. I have no more money.
Got it. I worked for Verizon Wireless for a long time. I started with customer service in the call center. Was a team manager, floor supervisor in a call center. That's how I started with them. And managing teams was kind of my beginning. And then I ended up kind of transitioning into reporting and leadership support. So I was the call center reporting person. And I supported the director, putting reports together and PowerPoint decks. Yay! So I moved into that role. And luckily I worked with a really great director who was willing to kind of teach me. And they were very focused on data and focused on, the math, which is great. So I was able to really kind of learn how to do it the right way. And then it moved into that was call center level. I moved into a regional position and then over an area within the corporate structure, still doing kind of reporting for customer service call centers. And then I moved into retail, the retail side of things with all the Verizon retail stores, and did not ever have a day of retail experience. But again, the director that was really helpful in training me hired me to kind of do some kind of staffing and forecasting for retail that would mimic how call centers staff, which is really very unusual. Retail, usually they're all on an island, every store. So every store is always understaffed because by the time someone quits, there's like a 4 to 6 week lead time to hire someone and get them trained.
Do we know what that's like at all?
Oh my gosh, I'm in that right now.
Yeah.
So I was trying to create like a new process for the region that we were in because he was trying to really figure out how do we get ahead of that, which is great. So we created a new kind of staffing and hiring process and forecasting headcount to get ahead of that always understaffed feeling at every store. People did not like that very much. Retail folks are very ego driven. And when you try to come in with a different process, and also you're not coming from retail, they do not want to go along with it. There's so much pushback.
Yeah, pushback. Oh, pushback. Corporate pushback.
So then I moved from that, and then there was a restructure, and I got moved into retail operations and managing a team of consultants who did like audits on the stores, compliance. They would do like merchandising rollouts, new product placement and training. So they kind of were compliance driven for the region. So I had to travel and do store visits all over. And so I managed that team. But again, I knew nothing. So luckily I inherited like this phenomenal team. So they would just teach me as we went, and I really relied on them, but I was their leader. So I really moved the rocks out of their way, basically. Yeah. I just was, my natural, like argumentative, stubborn person, and
you just bulldoze your way
fought
through.
For them. Yeah. But they were great. Then there was another kind of shakeup in leadership, and I ran into some issues with my direct leadership. So I moved back over to customer service reporting. And then doing, again, forecasting staffing. It's really budgets and headcount for all of the call centers in the country. So that's kind of where I was before I ended up leaving. But it was nationally forecasting call center staffing and like call volumes and all of the metrics there. It was quite the path. I kind of got a little bit of everything in the company. Pretty much.
No, that's very true. I mean, that's kind of how I felt with my banking career too. I mean, starting in as a teller, you're that entry level person into a bank. You don't know what the heck you're doing when you're a teller. You barely know how to count to 10. And so I started there. I moved up through the retail leadership, but I always stayed on the service side. I never wanted to do sales. I didn't like sales. I didn't think sales belonged in banks because it's a bank, it's a service, it's not a sales.
Yeah, that does seem a little bit weird.
Yeah, so much of the banking industry just doesn't quite fit. So I started over on the service side. I managed the tellers. And then when I left the retail side to move out to Arizona, I moved into operations, and I did back end like accounting support, where I worked in the department where we managed the GLs for all of the branches. So anytime they would run a check or anything through, we would have to balance those GLs and make sure everything cleared, all of that stuff. We called it accounting support, which is crazy because I don't know accounting. I know it now somewhat because I own a small business, but I didn't then. So I started there. That was my jump into operations. And then I moved over to a new bank in 2012 that moved out to Arizona, Silicon Valley Bank. Yes, I worked there. And I worked there for most of the remainder of my career in banking. I started in the deposit operations side of the house, where we would do like onboarding and like getting new accounts set up, doing the back end support, like again, always on the service side. And then I moved into overseeing the legal order process department. So anytime somebody got sued or had a levy, writ, garnishment, all of that kind of routed through my team, and we would be responsible for kind of taking care of the compliance aspect and making sure that all of the holds were put in place, all of that fun stuff. We also did the bankruptcies, deposit account control agreements, blocked account control agreements. So really anything that was kind of like contractually heavy for the bank, we would make sure that we had all of the accounts set up in a way that would comply. Again, this is why I was like, oh, compliance. I love reading legal documents.
That's weird.
I know. Getting writs.
I'm grateful that you do love reading them, but yeah.
Getting writs and levies and like reading through bankruptcy document paperwork. It was like, it was fun for me. I enjoyed it. I understood it. It was like a language that I could actually understand. So I went back to school while I was there. I got my bachelor's from ASU. I then went and got my master's from USC's law school. I got a master's in legal studies with an emphasis on financial compliance and regulatory compliance, because I was like all in. I was like, this is it. And so while I was getting my master's is when I moved into actual compliance. And I was a compliance manager in the second line of defense, monitoring and testing. So we would go through and we basically looked at regulation level, and we would go in and look at the bank as a whole and say, how do we have our regulation controls in place? How do we have our controls in place to make sure that we're complying with this regulation? So like my biggest, I think one of my first exams was Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and Bank Bribery Act, which is like insanely large and like wielding. And especially when you have a bank that has offices in like China and the UK and Israel and all of these different like global offices, understanding Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and then also looking at the risks and controls that a bank may have in place or that it should have in place was such a weird experience because SVB was growing at a rapid pace. There was just so much growth, and there was just a lot of places where things got stretched really thin, and it's like that control, yes, works great for this size, but we probably need to up it. So it was like there were no findings, there was nothing like that, nothing bad happened, but it was one of those like explaining to people that it's like, but this could happen, and do you think you could catch it? And we're like, well, maybe. I'm like, okay, well, the maybe needs to be a yes. And so I was not the most loved person inside the bank. And then it just got really frustrating, going in and talking to different internal departments and trying to help them comply with these regulations. But so often I would hear them talk about, well, can I do this? Or I want to do it this way. Is that okay? And it's like, well, okay, yes, technically it is. But my question back to you is, should you do it? And, when you start having those like kind of philosophical conversations about what's right and what's wrong, it's like, it gets frustrating. It gets very soul sucking.
Jiminy Cricket for compliance.
Except for I got crushed.
Oh, well, except for that.
They crushed me. But yeah, and I mean, that's one of the soul sucking reasons why I left. Like, I really do think that there's a lot of good that can come from internal stakeholders kind of steering the ship, if you will. And I think that's needed. I don't think that's where my skill set was. And I think that for me was probably like the moment I knew like I need to do something else, because how can I do another 30 years of this, waking up every day feeling like I'm going into every conversation already defeated or like already being looked at as like the enemy from within. And it's just like, how do you wake up in the morning and like, ooh, I can't wait to go to work where all my coworkers hate me because I'm trying to get them to do the right thing or do something that might be more complicated because it's to make sure that we're always doing the right thing.
Right. Because it's going to be a little more work.
Yeah. It was like people, I think people got so offended. They thought I was calling them like, they thought our department, I don't want to say just me. They thought compliance and audit was saying that these people that we were talking to were horrible people and they were going to do these horrible things that we were saying could happen. And it's like, I don't think you're understanding that it's like, I am rating things that takes the whole things into perspective, including the people currently doing it. Like that is a variable that we have to weigh when we're doing our risk rating. And so it's just like, no, it's not necessarily that you are the risk, but the impact if this does happen is really high. So it's got like, it just outweighs who's doing it right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can be a great person, but what if you quit and the person that comes in after you is a total douche?
Right. So if that you're doing like the risk mitigation, but people, and you were looking at process, right? Mm-hmm. But people are taking it personally, which is really, it seems like anything in banking is very analytical and shouldn't be personal.
It shouldn't be. It really, really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I think one of the things like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the reason why that one got so touchy is because obviously that's looking at expenses. So anytime somebody goes out and runs something through for expenses, a lot of it had to route through our accounts payable department and like making sure that they had adequate controls to vet who was at that dinner. Because Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is very clear, like who is a government official. And we did business, and a lot of people do business in these countries where it's very high risk. China's the perfect example. So much of China is state controlled. Every bank out there has some form of state control. So anytime you're going to lunch or dinner with another banker, that is a state agent. And so it has to be monitored and it has to be flagged and you have to track it. It's not saying that you can't go to lunch with that person or can't go out to a business meeting with that person. It's just saying, you need to understand how you're monitoring this because that's how bribery works.
Right.
Is through state agencies. And when you have state actors, because it's government controlled, everybody's a state actor. And it's just very, very complicated. And people are just like, wait, you're saying I can't go to, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to have a process in place to identify these people and make sure that we know how we're monitoring it, because so much of business is like going out to business meetings, going out to an event, going to a conference. At what point does that tip the line? And that's where it's like, that's why it requires the monitoring, because there isn't a clear cut, oh, well, now you're definitely bribing, or now you're being shady.
So even though this is like very fun for you, what tipped you over the edge?
It was honestly the waking up and feeling like I was the enemy going to work every day. Like, I think that to me was the worst part, is like the number of senior leaders, and like there was people that reported to like COOs and like the president of the bank that were in these quote unquote risk roles that basically would try to tear me down every day and like undermine me. And it started to feel like it was more personal than actual professional. And it's just like, these people are people that came from some of the banks that have some of the worst compliance failures, and they are in the head of risk department. And like, there is one person specifically that I cannot stand her. She was a terrible person. She came from Deutsche Bank, and they have a great track record. But she just would like, she made things so personal, and she like started attacking me personally and questioning my integrity and questioning like, and you know me, if you question my integrity, like we're going to be fighting.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
are going to be fighting, because it's like, that is what drives me, is ethics and integrity and doing things right. And do I do it right all the time? No, I fuck up too. But like my desire behind everything is I'd like to think very filled with a lot of integrity. So when you start coming after my integrity and trying to get me in trouble, quote unquote, with my manager, because you think you have this higher position, which you do, great, good on you. I don't think you deserved it. I don't think you knew what you're doing. I think you contributed to a lot of things that happened at that bank. But that's just me.
Yeah. The egos involved when people are climbing that corporate ladder.
Oh, God.
It's very apparent that it really is more about their selfish goals than necessarily doing what's right for companies or for their teams or their people. Not every leader, but unfortunately, it comes across as many higher level. I don't even want to say leaders.
They're not. That's the thing.
They're not. I know. Leading and having a title are two different things.
Right.
But I think that is, unfortunately, that's just a mainstay in corporate jobs.
Yeah. So that was kind of my tipping point, was that. But what about you? Where did that land for your journey?
Mine. So I really, okay. So the last role I had was very soul crushing for me, because I was in the role a number of years. I want to say, 5 years or something, doing the headcount management and planning for the call centers across the country. But within that time, we closed 2 or 3 call centers a year. So it's thousands of people that I'm planning for them to lose their jobs. And I know this a year in advance, right? And I'm having to keep 2 sets of books, basically, because it's NDA'd. And doing that year over year is just like so draining, right? So, and then you're constantly doing the work over and over again. Oh, well, we're going to change this one metric. So now you need to redo the entire forecast for both sets of books, right? It was Groundhog Day. It was the same like spreadsheets over and over and over, literally like every day we'd have to make a change. And during budget season pretty much went the whole year, because while you're planning for closures, everybody needs to have their input and change. Maybe the timeline changes, maybe like the number of jobs they're offering relocation changes, maybe the policy changes. Like at one point it wasn't, I might have mentioned this before, but at one point it wasn't okay to have remote workers. And then the next year we started an entire department for home-based agents. So like that would change the whole forecasting process too. So it was really a lot of rework. And then also like all of that work fell onto a very small team. So the pressure is really high, because senior leadership needs updates. They need decks. They need to have conversations about it, which is, valid. But then following on a small team doing that, I mean, just the weight of the task is there, but then also the pressure and the timelines. And trying to work through these changes over and over again, man, the question, when will this be ready, made me want to murder people. I like, well, if you stop changing things, then you would have already had it by now. But now I'll have to work till 3 a.m. to get this for you by tomorrow morning, because, you're leaving it on a team of 3 or 4 people doing the work. So that weighed on me. So knowing that we're downsizing year over year, right? We're closing call centers. And then within that, there were also additional layoffs. So, we keep talking about workforce reduction in this podcast. Mm-hmm. It's constant. So people in corporate jobs, they're always waiting for that to happen. Like, okay, is it this month? Is it next month? And you and I and our families personally, we know, like, we're like, oh, is it our time? Is it coming? Is it coming in 6 months? It's definitely coming, but when? So after doing that for a few years, there was this mass voluntary severance package that was offered. And it was offered to specific titles, kind of like middle and upper management for the most part. So, and I had been saying for a while, I'm just waiting for my check. Like, I'm just waiting for my check. I'm taking it. And there was, when the announcement came, this is so funny, but when the announcement came, we were on a cruise with some friends who not all, but a lot of them also worked at the same company, right? We all got this email. So as soon as we got off the ship and we were having, breakfast before we flew home, we're like, oh my God, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Like, we're having this whole conversation. And I was like, well, I'm taking it. Like, I don't think I had a second of hesitation. And there was still a timeline before it actually took place. Like, you had to think about it time. Like, you had a couple months to decide. You could click the yes, but if you change your mind, you could still click no. And, you could change your mind. Then there was kind of like, after you decided, you could still change your mind for a few weeks. And then it went to like an approval process. So not everyone was approved to take it, but I got approved. But as soon as I hit yes, like, I think my whole team was like, we're taking this personally. Like, you're so excited to leave. Like, I was like, yeah, bye. Sorry. I apologize, but I will transition all my work to you. And then I'm going to run away. And then once I did get the approval, I think I got approval like in December. So I knew what my timeline was going to be. And I had to keep working until I was like the last wave. They had like 3 waves, but because of my title, I had to stay till the end. And so I still had to work through the end of June or something.
Ugh, that would have been like...
No, but knowing, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't care about this meeting. You guys can take it. They would come to me with questions and I'm true. Like, well, what do you think? It's not my problem anymore. Like, I really did have like a window of time where I was like, I don't care. You guys figure it out. And it was so fun because I never had that before. Before, everything was like, oh, I have to make the right decision and take care of my team and be the buffer. And then I was like, oh no, you can take this call. I'll sit and listen, but you're going to talk. I don't need to say anything. I'm out of here. So,
do you think if you went back, you would still carry some of that attitude?
Yeah.
100%. I do too.
100%.
Yeah.
If I went back to a corporate job, it would be very different.
Yeah.
I do think, as combative as I was, depending on my role, it was always to make sure my team was taken care of and that things were being done for the right reason, but also the pressure from leadership down, I would just take the brunt of that because I was the shield basically, and dealing with, egos. And again, how did you get into your role kind of people? Oh, it's because you're friends with, these other 2 douchebags. And so now it's the 3 amigos, right? Doing whatever they want and just being dicks to everyone. So I feel like if I ended up going back into a role, my attitude would definitely carry some of that. Fuck it. I'm going to say what I need to say.
Right.
And what are you going to do?
Right.
What are you going to do about it? You're going to fire me?
Okay.
Like, let's go to HR and have a conversation. Like, now I think I would be a lot more, I won't say aggressive, but like
stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. I think even now, even in my small business, like I'm very protective, but at the same time, I also understand like it's relatively low stakes owning a coffee shop. Like there's a lot of money online, but the decisions my team, they're very young that they're coming to me with. I employ that tactic of like, what do you think? I'll sit here and listen while you call that vendor. Like it's really kind of just like they kind of think it's very, very stressful and overwhelming, but really it's not. And so like it makes it very easy for it to be kind of like, no, let's force you to grow. It's like, I know I can do it, but it's why do I need to call the vendor to put the order in because you don't want to talk to somebody on the phone?
Yeah.
So like that's the type of low stakes stuff we're talking about now. So it's just like,
yeah.
So I do think I would carry a lot of that back into like a full corporate if I had that as well. Just like over it. So now we know where we both came from. We kind of know a little bit of our background. We kind of know why we left. I'm curious if you're at this point, right? You just took the package.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about what's next. What did you think or expect maybe small business ownership to be like at that point? Kind of what was your expectation? And then we'll go into like what the reality has been later. But.
Okay. Well, one of the things is I did not anticipate owning a business. I didn't have a plan.
That's fair.
When I got you got approved in December, I was like, cool. Let's see what the universe brings. I don't know what I'm going to do. Am I going to go find another spreadsheet job? Maybe. Am I going to like stay at home and watch TV all day? I don't know. Like I really had no plan.
So you were either in like early retirement or going back to another corporate shill job.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wasn't going to sit at home all day because that's just not.
It sounds fun, but it's
just
not
in me. Like I have to be productive.
Yeah.
Like I can remember being on maternity leave and feeling like, oh my God, I'm not being productive at all. Right. And freaking out like, oh, I got to get back to work, which is so stupid.
Yeah.
But, I have to be productive in some form. So it's very weird, but I did. I opened it up and I was like, okay, universe, let's see what you have. We went on vacation for spring break that following, I think, March. And this is really weird because we weren't really planning on doing this either. We were trying to go to DC and my kids are opposites. So one was really excited about it and one was about to murder me because she did not want to do that. But DC was so expensive, flights and hotels and everything. So we actually pivoted and went to London and it was less expensive. And none of us had been to London before. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, let's just do that instead and see what's out there. Well, we ended up doing afternoon tea like 3 different times in 3 different places. And it was the one thing that my kids agreed on. Like the whole time they were fighting. Every museum, one of them hated. Every like fun, like shopping or foodie thing, the other one hated. So they were driving us crazy. But every time we'd have tea and like did the full afternoon tea, everybody was excited. Like everybody was happy and it was so fun and they really, really liked it. So as we're going through the week that we were there, I guess my brain was like, oh, well, this seems fun. We could do this. This isn't by my house. And so talking to my husband about it, on the flight home, I started writing a business plan. Like, where did that come from? I don't know. So crazy. It was like the tea room needed to be born and the universe just worked through me somehow. Cause I really felt like it was not me doing it. Like it wasn't in my control, which is so weird. But, yeah. So by the time we got back from London, I'd kind of written a pseudo business plan about what it should be, what it should look like, and where. And I had parameters, like I had to be close to my house because I'm not going to commute, and it needs to be this and it needs to be that. And then within 18 months, it was open, which is so crazy without knowing a single thing about what the hell I was doing. I don't know how I did it.
I feel like there's so much of small business that like truly relies on the ignorance.
Oh yeah.
Like ignorance is bliss.
Yes.
Is a true statement in small business because like there's so much crap that I've done and I'm like looking back, it's like, I would never do that now. I would be so like terrified of like, what am I getting myself into? And now but now I look back and it's like, I totally just like walked into this place and bought it. And then, yeah, I could do this. That ignorance, so helpful when you're starting a business.
Yeah. So what was your final straw? And then what took you to the coffee shop?
I think so for me that I don't know if there was a final straw. So like this was 2020 was when I was really going through it. And I ended up leaving in 2021. And so 2020, well, back up 2019, Jesse and I decided to try starting a travel agency. We started in November of 2019. So real good timing.
Mm-hmm.
We booked one trip for somebody and I realized I hate planning other people's travel. So,
Surprise.
surprise. So yeah, that was very short lived. But once we, shut that down, the pandemic hit, all that stuff. We started looking at we didn't look at anything for a while because it was pandemic. But when we did, we started looking at franchises for coffee shops because I again was like, well, maybe I want to go back to we'd always talked about owning a bar or a coffee shop or something like. There was so many places that kind of we connected with when we were living in San Diego or growing up. So we wanted to create that. And so we looked at franchises. And so I guess in a way we kind of started getting our feet wet looking through franchises. We started looking at what it would take, what it would cost. And it's very expensive for franchises.
Yeah.
And you pay 7 to 10% every month off of the top.
Yeah, I looked at one too before. I was kind of playing around with it, and I thought, oh, that would be fun. But then I realized you really have very little control.
Very little.
Yeah.
And for me personally, there was 2 franchises that we got into deep discussions with, and both of them, if you dug deep enough into the ownership, the owners frequented Trump International and Mar-a-Lago, and it's fun fact, no, don't want to do that. So we just honestly Googled coffee shops for sale in Tempe because we're in Arizona. And there was a coffee shop that was right behind our house. We'd been to once. It was very small. And I recognized it from the picture because most for sale businesses just use generic pictures because they don't want you to know what it is.
Oh, okay.
But this one had a picture. It was, I think, intended to be generic, but because I'd been in there, I knew what it was. And I was like, oh my God, that's literally right behind my house. We're less than a block away from my business and we're recording this in my house. It's very much the lazy man's business. So we started looking at it. It was relatively cheap. And I was just like, well, why not? Let's try, let's see. And so we put in an offer, it got accepted, and then I quit my job.
So you put the offer in before you quit.
I did.
Got it. Okay.
I did. I put the offer in, and it only took probably about a week to get it back. But yeah, I put the offer in. We closed, I want to say it was June 1st-ish time frame. I have to look back at the dates now. But, and I quit on July 10th or something like that because I wanted to wait for that last round of stock purchase of that incredibly valuable SVB stock. Thankfully, I sold some of it to buy the coffee shop, but yeah, obviously when that bank went under, so did my stock. So that was sad because that was my safety net, but luckily I haven't needed it, so I'm okay. But yeah, so I had quit after making the decision to purchase, so I kind of knew this was me going all in. This was going to be my next career, and we're going to see how we can make it work. Jesse kept his job so we could keep the paycheck coming in from him. And I could really focus on, getting the business off the ground, being the original staff and growing it from there. But I think for me, what I expected small business ownership to be was at that point, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be great. I'm going to wake up and this is going to be cheers. I'm going to go in and be like, hey, buddy. Hey, pal, this is great. That's 0.01% of the job.
Yeah, I thought the same, right? I think I mentioned that too before, oh yeah, just make tea for people and chat with them and hang out. And
so low stress. Just
that's totally not what it is.
Hey, let's chat and have how you doing today? Yeah, no, that doesn't work. You're sitting here so much. Yeah. So anyway, the reality has been far, far, far different from what that is. But I think that's kind of where I was right at that point. And so I think this is actually a really good time to now jump into life after taking the leap and what that has been like. So I think we're right on that cusp. So the scariest part of quitting for you, you didn't really have the scary parts. You were just like, paycheck.
It was party time.
Yeah.
I was so excited, but I did tell my kids, I said, there are no more birthday presents or Christmas presents.
Grinch.
Every dollar is going to the new baby, which is the business. So sorry, you guys are old enough to not need it. Bye.
Now you could all feel like there's a baby in the family.
Yeah. Exactly. So like I did kind of set expectations, like I'm all in. Like every minute of my day is figuring this out and like getting this thing to work.
Yep.
So they kind of knew ahead of time. The scariest part though was financially. I did have a severance check and I saved every cent of it to go into the business, but it was not enough.
Yep.
Like to do a full kitchen and plumbing and build out of a space like that, you know, we had to find money from other places to pay for just construction.
Right.
Much less rent. That I signed a lease in November of 2019.
Woo.
And then, you know, COVID hit. So all the construction delays happened. Like it just slowed everything down, but I still had to pay rent.
So you didn't get any rent abatement?
No, I got 1.5 month rent abated until the following February. That was it through COVID.
Oh, Jesus.
So again, financially, that was the scariest thing. But, you know, I really had read You're a Badass at Making Money. And I love Jen Sincero. She's amazing, very motivating. But she basically, one thing that stuck with me, and I reread that book pretty often, is like, if it doesn't scare the shit out of you, you shouldn't be doing it. Like,
that's true.
The reason, like the motivation there, if you're not kind of scared of what you're jumping into financially or otherwise, you're not really committed to making it successful. If you're just 1 foot in, there's no motivation to like really grind it out and make it work.
Yeah.
So I was very worried about the financials, and I always am.
I think that's such a good point because like even if it was very short lived, but the travel agency, like there was no skin in the game for us, right? We both had corporate jobs. We were doing it on the side. So it's just like, what happens. Maybe we'll get successful and one of us can do this full time and we'll just travel a bunch and work remotely. It was kind of like the big picture dream. But like, were we really going to put in the hours needed to make that happen? No, probably not, because we didn't have anything forcing us to. Quitting my job, because I quit. So like for me, I was so terrified because I was like, okay, I'm looking at this business. Like we're the third coffee shop to go into this space. Are we going to make it 3 for 3 failures in this space? Like, is this space cursed? Is there a reason why? Like, am I dumb to even be considering this because 2 other coffee shops didn't work in this same space? The flip side of that was it only cost me $50,000 to buy the assets of the business. I didn't buy their business, so I didn't keep their LLC. But I bought the assets and it was contingent upon assuming the lease. So I didn't get any rent abatement, but I did move into a built out space, thankfully. So I just had to clean because it was disgusting, unfortunately. And I had to clean and I had to put some art, kind of make it our own. Like we put murals up and that's kind of where we invested. And then we opened a few months later. It took far longer than it should have to open because I was so scared. I think I was like terrified of like failure. So I was just like, well, if it's not open, then I can't fail.
Yeah,
Like,
I get that too. Avoidance.
Yeah.
I do that as well.
There was a lot of avoidance at the beginning. And, you know, even when you think about like our first hours, we opened and our first hours were from 5 p.m. until 10 p.m. for a coffee shop.
Well,
I mean, we have foot traffic in the evening where we're at because of our neighbors. So, I mean, there was some logic behind it, but it's not the smartest logic for sure.
yeah.
Like we didn't open up at 7 a.m. until probably a year in. Dumb choices. Maybe we could have done so much better for sure, but no. So, I mean, I think there's the scariest part of quitting is like, how am I going to replace this income? And I think it takes, you know, thankfully, at least we both have husbands that thankfully still make stable money. So if we have to turn off our paychecks, we can. That gives us some additional like flexibility and leverage as small business owners.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of small business owners actually do have that.
Yeah.
So I think you and I are lucky in that aspect that my business success is not what's paying my mortgage.
Right.
Thankfully,
Yep.
I can focus 100%. And if I don't take a paycheck, which I don't, it's okay because I'm providing 12 jobs to other people.
Right.
And so I have to really keep that in mind with the financial piece. But yeah, you and I are very lucky in that situation.
And that's not the case. There's a lot of business owners, and I think you see it, especially in food and beverage, where like they get into it and they are really good at making XYZ food, but it's got to be them making it. And so like there's no alternative for them. So it's really hard to scale and grow when you have to be doing the job and you can't be focusing on the business. Like, so when they say like work on your business, not in your business, that is a benefit that both of us have, is we can focus on our businesses.
Well, we can now, but it didn't start that way.
It didn't.
And it doesn't start that way for every small business owner. You have to be in it to start and figure out what the direction is.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it was probably the first year and a half before I truly, probably 2 years in before I truly got out of the day-to-day. Like it probably wasn't even until like maybe 4 or 5 months ago that I transitioned like scheduling and like some of those like other tasks over to the staff, where it's like I have supervisors now that I trust and that do incredible work. And so I can help grow them as leaders, and I can take myself out and focus really on the business growth. But it takes a lot of time to get there. And that means that you're investing a lot of time. So I wasn't necessarily a barista for the full 2 years, the first 2 years, but I was a barista the first few months. And I was I always talk about staffing a small coffee shop. Like there's that 15-minute period where you need 2 people, but you're not going to bring somebody in for a 15-minute shift. So it's like, well, I'll just work here all day. And then when that 15-minute rush hits, because you don't know where it'll hit, I'll just jump up and be a barista to provide that support. So you're providing that like rubber band elasticity to your business to grow in a very affordable way, free.
Yeah. I had to work yesterday for free.
Yes, you did.
The whole day. And, I have to apologize to every customer.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. I'm so sorry. I am covering today and I'm very slow. And they're like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah. But you get your tea made by the owner.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
Oh, I try not to even say that. I just say, oh, I'm just covering today and I'm really slow.
I had to ring up a coffee the other day and I could not find the coffee button. It was so sad. But yeah, so I think the scariest part is like kind of that it is figuring out how are you going to make this work. But I think that is also a critical element to anybody's success, is you have to kind of have that fear underneath it.
Absolutely, you do, which is a weird thing. I never expected that, but the fear is actually really important.
I think it is. I think the fear and the imposter syndrome, people don't talk about that enough. I feel like the fear, and then you're like, well, I know I need to do this, but am I qualified to do this? Is like oftentimes what people think. Like that's where that imposter syndrome sinks in, and like people will sometimes shy away from making the decisions or taking the action, thinking like, well, I obviously can't do that. I've never done. No, you can. Just do it. Just do it. None of us know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Fun fact. Just do it. Just dive in and figure out how to make a custom printed bag for coffee. You're going to forget things. You're going to mess things up. But you know what? You did it. And if you don't do it, then you're never selling coffee. So it's like there's several different things where it's like, if not me, then who? And I think that's one of the things that like for me, ownership really does come down to when you sit there and question any single task and think about, well, who's going to do this? The answer is probably you.
It's always you.
Yeah.
You have to do it first before you can have anyone else do it, so that you know that they're doing it right.
Right. And I think for those people that maybe don't want to, like, if you have a dream job and you're like, hey, I really want to wake up every day and go make coffee for everybody. Great. Get a job as a barista. Don't own a coffee shop.
Right.
Because I can tell you, even if I wanted to go make coffee every day, I don't have the bandwidth to do it. Keep my business running. Right.
Right.
But that's the thing. Like that just kind of illustrates, like if you have the dream to do this one function, then that's a job. That's not ownership.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
I think.
What would you have done differently?
Open sooner.
But that was a pretty short timeline, even though, you feel like it was delayed?
Yeah. I mean, I really, really, really could have opened sooner. I was terrified. There were a lot of days where like we had that projector in the lobby. There were days where I would go and just watch TV. I would clean shit,
Okay.
but like clean shit very slowly watching TV. Like I watched like 2 seasons of Amazing Race, like old seasons, just for fun. Just for funsies. So I think there was a little bit of decompression from corporate too, though, that I needed as well.
The
so like
PTSD.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to shake it off a little bit.
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
I think there was a little bit of that.
Well, also, and this is along the same line, there's so many kind of rules you live within as a corporate employee that it does take a minute to shake it off and to say, oh, well, I decide.
Yeah.
But no one's telling me. I don't need to wait for someone to tell me, but mentally,
you're waiting for somebody to tell you.
You are waiting for direction, especially if you've been in corporate, a significant period of time. And it is difficult to kind of shake that off.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that would be the only thing I wish I would have done sooner is done that. I also wish I would have probably taken, like, people don't talk about this enough. It's expensive to trademark stuff. It is, but do it early, do it quick. Get your, like, if you have an idea and you're going to go in with it, spend the money, trademark it, go through the process, because that way you're not 4 years in and trying to figure out, well, what do I do in case I can't actually continue with this name? So that kind of sucks. But yeah, so those would probably be the 2 biggest things I would do differently. And what else? I guess I would also use more resources. I use Score, but we got a really crappy Score mentor. And so like I kind of stopped looking at resources because I was like, wow, it's all these old white guys that just want to tell us how to run businesses in 1952. And I don't give a shit about how businesses were run in 1952. So I stopped using resources, but very quickly on, once I actually opened my doors and got connected to some valuable resources, especially here in Arizona, like Local First and others, like it truly is a game changer. Like understanding that people are going to help you just because they want to help you. And like, you don't, like, I was afraid, like every time I'm like, if I talk to you, do I have to pay you? Like that thought process ran through my head so much. If I talk to you, do I have to pay you?
Yeah, I tried to. So I think for me, something I wish that I had been able to do differently is actually talk to, like, have candid conversations with food service owners or restaurant owners.
So many don't want to.
Well, I ran into some bad experiences reaching out and trying to just ask questions like, operationally, how do you do this? Or because I did not know what I was getting into. And without being able to ask someone questions, I'm just winging it, right? And then it's taking longer to create process in my business. I mean, it took us probably a year or 2 to really figure out, oh, this is our flow. This is how it should work. This is right. This is what we're doing. We're not just making it up every single day in complete chaos. But also your business grows at a slower pace, so you have the time to kind of figure that out. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, but the conversations I did have with some people were terrible.
Yeah.
Egotistical. And that's the thing in food service too. You run into the egos. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about you and your ego. I just want to know where you're buying supplies. Right? I don't want any part of your business. I'm not going to steal your customers. I don't even know what I'm doing. I just am asking some basic questions. So if I had been able to find some restaurant owners or food service owners that I could have candid conversations with, that would have been tremendously helpful. But it was also in COVID.
Yep.
And so I just had to cross my fingers and hope that I didn't mess it up too bad.
So now I think we've gone through our origin stories. We both have talked about what took us from corporate America to small business. Now it's time for my favorite part, rapid fire chaos, where we react to absolute nonsense happening in the world of business and corporate America. It's very fitting this week for us. All right, so we're just going to keep it very simple this week with 2, because I feel like there was 2 that fit perfectly, one for each of us to talk about. Mine was Starbucks faces largest worker strike over anti-union practices. So my question is, if workers are literally walking out on you in record numbers, maybe, just maybe, you're the problem? I think you might be the problem.
With such a large workforce. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming Starbucks is, I mean, it's global at this point for
Yeah.
sure. So I don't know what their total employee numbers would be.
Thousands. It's thousands. And I think for me, the part that really frustrates me reading about this is like, they're not asking for unrealistic shit.
Right.
Like, they're not asking for like a bajillion dollars. They're literally just asking to be treated like human beings.
Right.
Like, it is some of the simplest shit that this company could do. And this company has rested on its laurels for far too long. And yes, early on in the early 2000s, they were a company that were outpacing others in the industries with the benefits that it was providing. But they are no longer outpacing them. The benefits are not actually something that are putting their employees up for success in the future. There are some, yes, I'm not going to discredit it, but for the vast majority of what they're doing for their employees is just really just labor abuse, pure and simple labor abuse. And it's psychological warfare on them. Like, they are forced to be in this customer service role and get eaten alive every day. And these people just are like, can I just get paid a living wage? Can I get healthcare? Can I know what my hours are going to be? Can you just like commit to some sort of schedule? Like, the sheer number of managers that, at least from my back in my time working at Starbucks, the sheer number of managers that would manipulate people's hours as a form of punishment. Like, I'm going to schedule you 4 weeks in a row at 18 hours, knowing that you're going to become benefits ineligible because you're not hitting the 20 hours required. Like, that type of psychological warfare is fucking bullshit. So yeah, good on these fucking employees for striking, because this is the type of shit where it's like, they're not asking for anything other than to be treated like a fucking human being. Sorry.
Yeah,
End
no,
rant.
so the interesting part is there are some benefits, but anyone I have talked to, or employees that I have that used to work for Starbucks, or people that we interview, the benefits are usually, it's short term in their mind, and it's just working there as a means to an end, right?
Yep.
So if they're taking advantage of the tuition, they're only working there for that benefit. They
Right.
don't want to be a part of the company. They don't like being part of the company. And more often than not, because I'm sure you see a lot of former Starbucks employees as
Tons.
well, so do we, which in one way is nice because they do have corporate training.
But they don't anymore.
But on the other hand, every single one of them says, I can't work for corporate. I don't like the environment. I don't want to be a part of it. They don't care about me. I'm a number, and I want to work for a small business where I'm actually treated as a human.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not that Starbucks can't treat these people like humans. They don't want to.
Right.
Like, let's be fully clear. A spade is a spade. They do not want to treat these people like human beings. They want to treat them as if they are a means to an end, and that end is shareholder profit and Howard fucking Schultz getting another fucking yacht or some bullshit like that. Like, I used to respect Howard Schultz until he has proven himself to be an egotistical, self-centered, all about me douche nugget. Like, cannot stand that man. Like, one of my main driving factors of why I got into starting a coffee company is I wanted to prove you could start a coffee company, hopefully grow a coffee company to the size that they are, and prove that the only thing I'm going to do differently is not take all the money for my fucking self, because I'm not a fucking egotistical asshole.
Right.
I don't need a fucking yacht. Period. Nobody does. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and it's so demotivating.
It is.
The horror stories, like some of the things I've heard from employees having to work there, I mean, it's a choice. They do it for a little bit of time.
It's capitalism. So
they
is
do
it a
for
choice?
a little bit of time for them to work there. And then they finally are fed up with it. But like the crazy things, like sometimes I was so shocked, but my former manager was there. She was like, oh, the number of times people are doing heroin in the bathroom. And I like fell off my chair. What are you talking about? She's like, no, for real. That's like a normal thing. Yep. Or if, there's a biohazard spill in anywhere in the store, it's really the decision to report it to corporate and wait possibly 24 hours for someone to come out and take care of it, or the employees literally going out there and doing, what's right, but also hazardous, but also gross, because they,
Yep.
they know it's going to impact customers and somebody has to do it. But it's so interesting to hear these like crazy stories. But then I know the scheduling piece, right? There's no rhyme or reason. Someone will be scheduled to close and then they'll be scheduled to open, right? Back to back. And, but you don't get these extra 3 hours every week because even if we're busy, because we don't want to pay you the benefits.
Yep. Yeah. It's pure manipulation. And so anyway, good on them for striking. I think honestly, the employees have the power, and I'm really excited to see that they are starting to exercise that power. Like, I am all for organized labor. I feel like that's the only way we're going to even make a remote sense of difference towards the capitalistic structure that we have. And, this is coming from somebody that owns a business. And if my employees wanted to unionize, I would say, good on you. Here's a union rep. Go figure it out. Like, there's pros and cons to it. I'm not saying there's not cons to it. There are. It costs money to be a part of a union. They represent you. But at the same time, when shit hits the fan, like, absolutely it benefits you.
Well, it's interesting because I've worked in both environments.
You have. I haven't.
Yes. I worked as a union employee at Disney and also Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
And then I was supervisor with Southwest working with the union. So that was a whole different perspective.
Oh, interesting.
Because you had to have a union rep at not all of your meetings, but any kind of disciplinary or like review, like more official meetings, like one-on-ones were fine, but there was always union reps needed to be involved. So that was a good learning as well. So I've worked on both sides of it. And then Verizon was not unionized. And there was kind of anti-union education, but at the time it was, there were pockets, mostly retail, that were trying to unionize, but overall the company was doing the right thing for employees. So it wasn't necessarily like the Starbucks situation. Like, the benefits were good and they were providing employees, good support systems. And so there wasn't necessarily a reason to do that, except there were some outliers, specific stores that felt that they needed to unionize. But overall, the company was actually doing the right thing. So I've seen both sides of it.
That's good. And I don't think there's any reason for my staff to necessarily unionize, but I'm not going to stand against it if they want to. Like,
but if you're doing
the right thing, it shouldn't matter.
And you're focused on your employees are humans,
it just shouldn't matter.
Right. Exactly. Well, we keep talking about record profits with these corporations. So this headline is, despite record profits, companies complain about work ethic crisis. Do they actually want people to work, or do they just miss the days when everyone had Stockholm Syndrome?
100%. They just miss the days where everyone has Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah. This conversation is really interesting, though. So again, I have dual perspectives. Apparently I have a lot of dual perspectives of things.
Maybe check a doctor out.
Yeah. One is, there is, in corporate culture, there is this self-entitlement that I think sometimes comes with newer employees or people coming out of, maybe they've recently graduated with a degree, they're going into a corporate job that is potentially something that their degree helps them with, but most likely not. But they come out thinking, oh, well, I need to be a director or a vice president like in 2 years. And that is not realistic, but the expectation from those employees is that you need to help me get promoted to this role within 2 years. And I'm sure, like, I've seen that when I was in corporate, people just really having these crazy expectations, like, oh, okay, but those jobs aren't really readily available and you don't qualify because you just started. So there's a little bit of the ego that comes in even with new employees into a corporate role. And I know people still in corporate will have people coming to them saying, well, you're not helping me get there. Well, what have you done? You have done nothing.
Yep.
You just started. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a VP in 2 years. That's not how it works. So that kind of skewed expectation is part of it, because I don't want to generalize. Some people don't want to do the work in the middle to get them to the next role. They just want instant gratification.
But I will also add, I think another leading contributor to this is you have those of us that are maybe elder millennials that were in corporate that had put in the time. And yes, I was in my 30s when I left. I understand that. I started when I was 18 in the banking industry. So like I did have a good chunk of time in the industry. So time invested. I was getting my education. I did get my degrees. I got all that stuff. But there's also those people that I think, especially now post-pandemic or like after COVID kind of hit, where they started to realize they're like, wait, I've invested all of this time. I've sat here. I've been the good boy. I've done what you said to do. I've waited my turn. And now you're still fucking me over. Like the elder millennial group, I feel like is this group that, and this is not just because I am one. I think every generation has like their like big pet peeves. But like for me, it's really frustrating to see how like our generation just kind of gets shit on every fucking time. We literally watch thousands of people die on TV in school. And then we graduate from high school into the worst economic recession. And then it's like, okay, great. Now go get a job and get a house. Oh, wait, now the housing market has crashed. Okay, great. Now like you're finally getting somewhere. The global pandemic, like there's something every time we turn around and we try to succeed. And it's just like, there becomes a point where we just start going, fuck it. I'm just going to earn my paycheck. And yeah, I'm going to quiet quit on you. And I don't really want to work. And I'm going to do the bare minimum. Or I'm going to make your life a living hell by working for you. And yeah, I think that's fair. Fair. It's kind of like, you know what, billionaires, you bought this. Fuck around, find out.
Yeah. I'm not discounting that at all, but I think I'm talking about.
I see what you're saying.
People coming right out of school.
Oh yeah.
Getting some kind of corporate job. And especially in corporate consulting, which is just a cesspool. I think, right? Like you're doing a bunch of nonsense work, but you expect that now you're going to be a VP. But I do think there is like your point. Absolutely. There's been roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and then the layoffs constantly. But there is a section too, where they just feel like, well, I got my degree and now you need to pay me all this money and I have to have a title and I know better than you. And that is not the case. But on the flip side, I will say, I think there's a generalized complaint about the younger Generation Z. They don't want to work. They're entitled. And to be honest, the Gen Z, I don't want to say kids, but they're kids, my kids. They bust their ass. They're working multiple jobs. They are trying to make ends meet. They show up, they work hard, they are invested. So I feel like it is interesting. Like it depends on the circumstances, but then again, I'm going to flip again. Then there's also people applying for my jobs that are open. Set up an interview, don't show up.
Yeah.
Apply for a job, don't reply when we want to set up time to talk to them.
I think that's every generation, though.
It's crazy.
I think those are things that happen every generation. I don't disagree. The rap that Gen Z gets right now is kind of an unfair one. And every now and then I'll take a dig at them. And I think it's just because like there's trauma of being the millennial. And like I feel like we were one of the first generations that really got shit on.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't disagree.
The millennials, like, we got shit on by everybody because the internet came up with us and they were just like, wow, these millennials are like, and I was like, shut up, fuck you. But Gen Z, I employ predominantly Gen Z employees. And like, it shocks me the number of times I find out they have 3 and 4 jobs.
Absolutely.
It's like, oh, you can't work that day? Why? What do you got going on? Well, that's the day I've committed to work here and here. Oh, okay. Oh, so that's what we're playing. We're literally trying to schedule you to work as many of the 24 hours that are possible so you can do what? Oh, afford rent.
Yeah.
Got it. Rent and food. You're just trying to get those two things. Perfect. Yep. You lost.
Yeah. Basic
You're
human
losing this
needs.
game.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a really interesting dynamic when it comes to the work ethic crisis, because you have a mix of like perceptions, and I think you have a mix of people that are at different stages of their career, and good on Gen Z for thinking they deserve more and demanding more, because I do think that is how we're going to get some form of progress to come forward, is like corporations are going to have a real tough wake up call when Gen Z is just like, no, I'm not going to buy shit from you.
Yes. And I don't want to work for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, go sit in the corner and figure out what you did, because I'm not going to buy money. I don't have money. So my money that I spend, I will spend more money at this small place that I know supports me and I know is trying to make my life better than saving the $2 to spend it at your place. Sit and spin.
Yeah.
Sit and spin. So
I agree
good
with
on
you.
them for that.
But I mean, I think this headline is really coming from a corporate perspective. Right.
Yeah.
And to be fair, if I went back to corporate, I would absolutely phone it in.
100%.
No doubt.
Hopefully nobody, if we ever do have to go back to corporate, nobody listens to this.
Exactly.
Because like I would quiet quit from day one. It's like, wait,
but
your reviews are like 1 through 5, 3 being meets.
Okay.
I'm going to shoot for a 2 or a 3 every time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, also, I feel like it would be a much easier job.
Yeah.
Than what we do today.
Correct.
So we wouldn't really have to necessarily phone it in. It would just automatically be easier.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. We're not trying to be doctors here. That's hard. Thank you, doctors and
Yes.
nurses and optometrists.
Yes.
And I don't need a podiatrist yet, but thank you.
But all of the doctors.
Yeah, all of the doctors. I don't know where that came from. Sorry.
No, I know. I couldn't do it. So I'm glad that someone is interested in that.
Yeah. All right. So final thoughts. If we could go back in time, would you still leave corporate to start your small business?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I sent so many see you later suckers memes the day I left, all day. I had them scheduled out. Everybody got the group chat and I said, I couldn't wait to leave. My team was so upset with me. They were like, you're so happy to leave us. I was like, yeah, sorry.
Yes, I am.
Bye.
Yes, I am. Yeah. No, I absolutely would as well. I think I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I think I get so much joy out of seeing like the community come together. And I think it's a fight every day for every dollar we earn, and like trying to make sure that we can keep some of that dollar so I can keep reinvesting it into my community and my staff. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because the happy moments and the joys are just so immeasurable.
I think just having a voice has been really beneficial overall, like as a business owner, keeping a voice out there for ethically, like things you believe in, sustainability and composting, and
not being a dick.
That's important. I think.
I feel like that's a great way to tie this one up.
Yep.
All right. So if you made it this far, first of all, congratulations. Second, we want to hear from you. If you have a small business origin story, or any stories really that you want us to talk about, tell us in the comments or DM us. Or if you're still in corporate and you just listen to this for the train wreck factor, respect.
Yes. I'm going to throw this in as well. If you are in corporate and there's something that you would like to have been able to say to a boss or a coworker or on a Zoom call, but you can't say it, email us and we'll go through it. We can say it just to be your proxy. So please send those to us as well. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review, and follow us on Instagram at Join the Chaos Podcast. If you hated it, send a strongly worded email to your boss, because honestly, that's probably the root of your problems. But if you are concerned about retaliation, just email us and we'll put a voice to it for you.
Yeah, we want all of that love in our inbox. It'll be so great. All right. So until next time, keep it messy, keep it loud, and most importantly, join the chaos.